Welcome back to the Bunkhouse. I'm so proud to introduce you to a very, very dear friend of mine. We've been buddies for a long, long time. He's my favorite cowboy singer, and he lives out in Hamilton County, Texas. Don Edwards, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Red. I appreciate it.
I know you got a very busy schedule and took some time for you to...
That's a good thing.
...to come to the Bunkhouse. Yes, well, it is a good thing. Well, we're glad you squeezed us in.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You know, we're going to be singing cowboy songs. We do that every day, and we recite cowboy poetry. Let's tell the folks who don't know where that art form came from. Let's start back in the old world and in the days, and then we're going to talk about who collected them and how they collected them, because that'll get us to the trail driving days. But where do those old songs come from?
England, Ireland, Scotland, primarily, I guess, you know, and they were old world songs. The tunes pretty much stayed intact, you know, but of course the lyrics were changed most of the time. But there were exceptions. I mean, one comes to mind would be Barbara Allen. Was pretty much stayed intact. I mean, the whole song. Didn't change it into a cowboy song or nothing. They're just cowboys like singing it.
Well, what about Streets of Laredo? Let's take that. You have a good knowledge of the history of those songs.
It has quite a history, and it's a wonderful little song, that traditional song that I think most everybody's aware of or knows. And it was taken from an old Irish ballad. It was called "The Unfortunate Rake," and it was you know, an ancient ballad, but it is also kind of entwined with the tune of the Bard of Armagh. And the Bard of Armagh is actually a newer song, but they've taken kind of the melody and then the story, basically, and then they changed it to the Streets of Laredo, and instead of dying in a hospital, he was died on the street. You know, it's much more macho kind of a thing to do, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, it was changed like that. But there's also a version of it that takes it away from the Streets of Laredo and puts it in the streets of Dodge City, Kansas, at Tom Sherman's Barroom, which was also what was called the Dying Cowboy, actually. But basically, they're interchangeable, you know, pretty much.
But that song's about 600 years old.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Another one
when
is
you go back and start there.
"Bury Me Not on the Lone Prairie." That came across as a seafaring song. It said, "Bury me not in the deep blue sea."
Yeah.
So we had that tremendous influence. Now, how did we save it? Those guys, Hollywood put the guitar in the hand of the cowboy.
There you go.
They didn't have guitars on those chuck wagons.
That's what they remember in Hollywood. They don't remember what went before.
Right.
Because in the cowboy singing world, there were really no stars of pure cowboy music. I mean, they were cowboys and musicians and people. There was, well, of course, Juice Verne Allen and Carl T. Sprague, you know, both from Texas.
Right.
And they never became a household name, you know. I mean, people like us know who they were, but they were no big names until they got to the movies.
So if a cowboy had an instrument, it was a mouth harp.
Yeah.
Because he had all of his belongings were wrapped up in his bedroll.
Exactly.
That chuck wagon cook's not going to let him put anything
Now,
in
he
that
had
wagon.
an advantage, the cook did, because he could carry a banjo or a fiddle or something like that in the wagon with him, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was primarily of Celtic origin also.
Usually.
And so he might have come from the East Coast, from the Appalachians, or and especially from the Carolinas and Tennessee and Kentucky.
You bet.
And he would have brought that art form with him, so he might have played the banjo or the fiddle. But then people started collecting those things, and if they hadn't collected them, they would have been gone forever.
I think they would have.
Because I've heard you say before that they only came in pieces. You know, there were very few complete songs because not many of those cowboys
They couldn't care less, right? They sang what they knew or made up something, you know, and that's, you know, they romanticized that, you know, singing to the cows at night, you know. It wasn't that the cows liked it, it was for their own entertainment, you know. So, you know, it was just a sound, you know, to have some constant sound that the cattle would be familiar with, you know, and people don't realize they're not the domestic cattle we know today, you know. They were wild like deer, you know. I mean, they were wild animals, basically, yeah.
And the songs that they sang had a mostly close to a monotone, so that the sound was constant and it was a low, soothing sound, rather than somebody who sings in a real high voice.
But I can't imagine nobody had ever thought of actually collecting the songs. I mean, just Jack Thorp. I mean, he's the guy that did it first. I mean, in 1908, he printed a book, but it was 1889 when he went out on a 1,500-mile journey he said he wanted to collect those cowboy songs. And And maybe if it weren't for him, that we probably wouldn't have had, the collection of them like that,
Do you think there's a chance that if he hadn't have gone to collect them, that John Lomax would not have collected
Now,
them?
Lomax did too. And the difference between Lomax's book, Cowboy Songs, was much more popular in the mainstream because he took a few liberties and changed them around a little bit and made, a good coherent song out of it. Whereas Thorp collected it as he went. Like he said that the old time cowboys, didn't know a song all the way through. And so he had to go to different sources and just piece them all together, as he did with, the Ballad of Sam Bass, That was one, for instance, that he used as an example. And, but now, not to discredit John Lomax at all. He did a monumental work at collecting cowboy songs, but now Thorp was one of them. I mean, he rode for the Bar W outfit in Lincoln County, New Mexico, and he was the real deal. Whereas Lomax was a professor and a folklorist,
Right.
and he collected these songs. And so anyway, his book became more popular because the songs were easier to sing, without having to go through them, as Thorp left them pretty much like they were.
It's amazing to me that they were able to collect those songs. Lomax, for example, lived close to the Chisholm Trail. So he was able to go hear those cowboys recite the poems and sing the songs. And then Thorp took that wonderful trip. And we're grateful to him, and I'm grateful to you for all the things you do to keep the history of our music alive. And
Well, thank you.
The way you sing.
Will you do the same?
For being my pal.
Well, thanks, Red.
Thank you, Don.
Appreciate you having me. Thanks.
Glad you came.